Her daughter stood in the driveway sobbing. "You're ruining my life," Samantha shouted. Joyce, her mother, handed the movers a folder labeled Returns Policy. "That's funny," she said. "I paid for your life." The furniture, the car, even the wedding ring. Joyce had funded it all. Now she was taking it back, one receipt at a time. She called me extra baggage in a whisper, but I carried every weight that built her life. The kettle had just started to hiss when Joyce paused mid-step, a ceramic mug warm in her hand. The voices from the hallway weren't meant for her, but the words were scalpel sharp, slicing through the quiet morning like broken china. "She's just extra baggage at this point," Samantha whispered. Joyce didn't move. She didn't breathe. On the other side of the kitchen wall, her daughter's voice softened, laced with that brittle faux compassion she reserved for company. "I mean, she's been living with us for 10 months, Jake. I love her, but it's like having a ghost that rearranges the pantry and leaves floral perfume in every room." Jake chuckled. "I thought she was only supposed to stay for a few weeks. She keeps acting like she belongs here." Joyce placed the mug down without a sound. The kettle screamed. She didn't storm in, didn't confront. Instead, she smiled quietly when Samantha entered the kitchen moments later, acting like nothing had passed between walls. "Morning, Mom. Tea?" Joyce nodded. "Already steeping, dear." Her voice didn't crack, but something inside her did, just enough. Not enough to cry, just enough to calculate. Later that day, while Samantha was out and Jake sat glued to his laptop in the office, Joyce opened her old leather-bound planner, kept tucked in the back of her closet, wrapped in a silk scarf. Notebooks these days were digital, but she never trusted clouds that couldn't rain. She turned to a fresh page and began to list. 1998, tuition deposit, $4,999 to 2003, monthly support during undergrad, $200 per month, x 48 months. $9,600 2009, wedding down payment $2,500 2012, IVF loan guarantee $5,800 2015 down, payment for current home $68,000 wired. Each number hit the page like a heartbeat. She remembered Samantha's wedding, how she canceled her own trip to Paris to afford the designer venue, remembered the whispered calls when Jake's job fell through, the way her retirement fund had shrunk, not because of time, but because of loyalty, baggage. She was the airline. That evening, Samantha sat across from her at dinner, scrolling on her phone with one hand and lazily twirling salad with the other. "So I was thinking," she said, not looking up. "Maybe we should start clearing the guest room closet. I want to use the space for storage." Joyce raised an eyebrow. Storage?" Samantha finally met her gaze, eyes wide like she hadn't meant to be heard. "Oh, I just meant, you don't need all those winter coats here. It's California." Joyce smiled. "You're right, I'll make space." Samantha relaxed. "Great. Love you, Mom." Joyce picked up her wine glass. "Of course, darling." Upstairs, after dishes and small talk and a long bath that smelled like lavender but felt like steel, Joyce took out her phone. She stared at the contact name for a moment. E. Kaplan, estate attorney, before typing, "Let's begin what we talked about." Quietly, she hit send. And for the first time in a long time, Joyce slept with the window open. Not for air, for clarity. She texts her estate lawyer, "Let's begin what we talked about." Quietly, they gave me a closet the size of my past, but expected me to shrink into it. The box was labeled sentimental. Inside it, her life in shrink wrap. Joyce knelt on the floor of the guest room, knees pressing into hardwood, surrounded by piles of folded clothes and mismatched shoe boxes. The guest room closet barely fit 2 seasons' worth of her wardrobe, let alone her history. But Samantha had been firm that morning, voice all syrup, words like a blade. "We're doing a minimalist refresh, Mom," she'd said, flipping through an interior design magazine at the kitchen island. "Could you maybe pare things down a bit? Just what you need, what actually fits the aesthetic." Joyce smiled. "Of course, dear." But inside, something twisted. Joyce carefully placed a silk blouse back into the box, a deep cranberry one she'd worn to her late husband's retirement dinner. Samantha had been 16 that night, rolling her eyes at the speeches, but giggling when her father toasted to the women who hold the foundation together. That blouse no longer fit the aesthetic, apparently. Neither did her heels or the perfume Samantha once borrowed as a teen, but now described as too heavy like an old church pew. The memory returned uninvited. The soft clink of wedding china, the sound of laughter under chandeliers. The red-eye flight to Paris she never boarded. Joyce had saved for years, years, to walk the cobblestones of Montmartre, to sip café au lait in a street corner cafe with a yellow awning and accordion music in the air. And she gave it up for Samantha's wedding. When the final payment was due on the venue and Samantha called, crying about losing the date, Joyce hadn't hesitated. She transferred her savings that same day. No questions, no delay. She never brought it up again until now. That afternoon, Samantha had friends over for brunch, women with manicured nails and designer sneakers who sipped mimosas and called minimalism a soul reset. Joyce stayed upstairs, folding scarves she had no room to hang. Then the laughter began, soft at first, then louder through the vent. I swear, Samantha giggled. She still wears that Chanel knockoff from like 2003, and that perfume, I don't know if it's roses or regret. They howled. Joyce paused mid-fold. The silk scarf slipped from her fingers. That night, after dinner and performative thank yous, Joyce returned to her room. The closet door creaked open like a sigh. She stared at the uneven shelf she had crammed with sweaters, shoes, keepsakes, a closet the size of a confession booth. She reached for the bottom drawer of the nightstand, one she hadn't opened in months. It stuck slightly, then slid free, and there it was, a folded document, yellowed, dog-eared, nearly forgotten, property transfer agreement, Joyce Ellis and Samantha Green Ellis. Her name, bold, centered, signed, co-owner. She stared at it for a long moment, not with surprise. She remembered now, vaguely, the deal they'd struck, the reason her name was still etched into the bones of this house. Samantha had never completed the final transfer, and Joyce had never let go of her 49%. She folded the document back carefully and placed it in a fresh envelope, tucking it under her pillow. Tomorrow she'd call Mara Kaplan again. Tonight she'd let the weight of it settle across her chest, not like a burden, but like armor. Joyce opens a drawer to find an old copy of the house deed with her name still on it. They served her mother last and still expected her to smile. The dining room was glowing. Candlelight flickered against polished wine glasses. Soft jazz curled through the air like perfume. Laughter danced between plates. Toasts were clinked. Glass was poured. And Joyce, she stood at the edge of it all, invisible. The table was set for 8. 7 chairs had names delicately written on folded cards. The 8th, hers, was without a name or even a cushion, wedged awkwardly at the end like an afterthought. She took it without comment, smoothing the linen napkin over her lap as Samantha floated from guest to guest like a hostess on a reality show. The plates came out in stages, first to the guests, then to Samantha and Jake. Joyce's was last, served lukewarm and barely seasoned. Oops, Samantha said breezily, setting it down. Guess yours took the scenic route, Mom. There was no apology in her voice, just amusement. Joyce offered a soft, closed-lipped smile and began eating. Across the table, someone leaned in toward Samantha. So, does your mom have Instagram? Samantha nearly spit out her wine. Instagram? She laughed, turning to Joyce. Mom thinks a hashtag is some kind of spice. A few chuckles floated down the table. Jake tried to look polite. Joyce dabbed her mouth with the napkin. I suppose I'm just analog in a digital world, she replied gently. Right, Samantha said with a smirk. We'll get you caught up one day, or not. Joyce's hand stayed steady under the table as she clicked record on her phone's voice memo app, tucked discreetly beside her water glass. The audio wouldn't win an award, but it would capture tone, cadence, proof. Not rage, not confrontation, just patterns. Because patterns tell stories, especially the ones built from subtle humiliations. As the dinner went on, she took quiet mental notes, Samantha gushing about the new kitchen backsplash they paid for themselves. Jake bragging about hosting without any help from the older generation. Joyce chewed each bite slowly, quietly, smiling with her eyes, but not her heart. Then her phone buzzed in her lap just once. A message from Mara. Start pulling any paper trail on the house. I've got bandwidth this week. Joyce typed back with one hand, already in motion. As dessert was served, a flourless chocolate cake she herself had baked but received no credit for. Jake leaned in, speaking casually, voice low, but not low enough. So, your mom's not staying long, right? Joyce didn't flinch, though her fork paused midair. Samantha replied with a light laugh. Oh, she'll be off to one of those senior co-ops soon enough. She's looking, aren't you, Mom? Joyce looked up from her plate, the candlelight dancing across her pupils. Oh, I'm looking, dear, she said sweetly, at everything. She let the silence hang, just long enough. Later, in the privacy of her room, Joyce replayed the dinner recording through a Bluetooth speaker the size of a coffee mug. She sat on the edge of her bed, hands folded neatly in her lap, listening to Samantha's voice loop again and again. We'll get you caught up one day or not. She'll be off to one of those co-ops. Mom thinks a hashtag is a spice. Joyce smiled, not bitterly, strategically. Then she opened her file labeled House Documents, Phase 1, and began separating copies into folders. Trust history, wire receipts, deed clauses. The table had been set. Now it was time to rearrange the seating chart. Samantha's husband casually says, Your mom's not staying long, right? They couldn't count on me, but I was counting everything. Joyce didn't move when the door clicked shut. She sat alone in the guest room, the glow from her desk lamp, casting long shadows across stacks of file folders. Samantha and Jake had left for the evening, a dinner downtown, something with truffle oil and curated cocktails. Joyce had other plans. She slipped on her reading glasses and opened the accordion folder labeled simply Records. Inside were quiet truths, slips of paper and PDFs that built the scaffolding of a life they took for granted. She spread them out on the bed like puzzle pieces, wire transfers, co-signed loan agreements, canceled checks with her initials in blue ink. They couldn't count on her. She'd kept count of everything. She found the tuition payment first, $14,200 to Stanford's registrar office, dated 2002. A scanned note from Samantha in the corner. You're the reason I get to chase my dream, Mom. Love you. Next, the $12,000 she wired to cover the remaining balance on the wedding venue after Jake's parents backed out. She remembered the call, Samantha's voice trembling, swearing they'd pay her back someday. Then the emergency business loan. Joyce pulled it out gently, fingers lingering on the corner of the page. 2016 personal check, $26,500. Memo. Seed capital for Samantha Green Creative LLC. Her hands tightened slightly. She remembered the day vividly. It was pouring. The retirement counselor had warned her, this reduces your long-term cushion. But Samantha had been desperate, sleepless, anxious, full of startup dreams and Pinterest boards. So Joyce cashed out part of her pension. No questions. And not once had her daughter looked back. She tucked the check copies into a new folder marked Asset Recovery Prep. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about an accounting of everything they thought was theirs, but had been hers first. Her fingers brushed against something thicker than paper, tucked between file sleeves, a photo album, dusty, leather-bound, and barely opened in years. She sat down slowly and flipped it open. There they were, baby pictures, Samantha in footed pajamas, Samantha's first steps, school dances, graduation. Joyce ran a thumb along a crayon drawing folded into one of the sleeves, a stick figure labeled Me plus Mommy, everything. And there it was. On the inside cover, faint but still legible. Thanks for everything, Mom. I'll make you proud. Samantha, age 11. Joyce's throat tightened. Her fingers lingered over the fading ink. For a second, just a second, grief swelled in her chest like a forgotten storm. But it passed. She closed the album gently and set it aside. Love and regret could live in the same room, but now they were no longer running the house. Her phone buzzed with a notification, a motion alert from the camera she'd discreetly installed in the hallway vent 2 weeks earlier, after Samantha had accidentally moved her medication to the wrong shelf. Joyce tapped the video. Samantha stood in the kitchen, wine glass in hand, whispering to her friend on speaker. "She can't even afford to leave. We have all the leverage." Her friend laughed. "So you're just waiting her out?" "Basically, one passive guilt trip at a time." Joyce stared at the screen, her jaw tightening just slightly. There it was, not just proof of neglect, proof of strategy. She pressed pause, saved the file, forwarded it to Mara with the subject line: Phase 2, initiate. Then she stood, walked to the mirror, and looked herself in the eyes. "No one's waiting me out," she whispered. She receives a hidden camera clip. Samantha saying, "She can't even afford to leave." They thought I was a guest. I remembered I was an owner. Joyce still owns 49% of the property legally. It had been collecting dust in a drawer beneath layers of forgotten batteries, loose thread, and a sewing kit she hadn't touched in years. But when Joyce pulled out the manila envelope and flipped it open, her breath caught, not from surprise, but from the sheer weight of confirmation. Her name was right there: Joyce M. Ellis, 49% co-owner. The ink was faded, but the contract was sealed, notarized, and fully enforceable. A signature from Samantha followed underneath, dated nearly a decade ago, and no follow-up transfer. They'd never finalized the deed. They'd never removed her from the title. Joyce stared at the document, heart steady, mind racing. It hadn't been a symbolic contribution. It had been real, legal, binding. She hadn't just helped them buy the house. She still owned nearly half of it. The walls around her, painted in Pinterest gray and lined with cold minimalism, suddenly felt less like a trap and more like turf. She scanned the document into her tablet and emailed it to Mara with the message, "It's still mine. Let's proceed." The reply came within minutes. "Mara, holy hell, this changes everything. You ready?" Joyce stared out the window at the lemon tree she'd planted when they first moved in. It had grown crooked but strong. "Joyce, I was born ready. Lock it up." That afternoon, she walked into the local branch of Evergreen Bank with a silk scarf around her neck and 3 neatly arranged folders in her tote. "Hi," she said to the manager. "I'd like to open a private account and transfer several assets, and I need to remove access from a linked emergency fund." The banker hesitated. "Are you sure? That joint fund is tied to a household account." Joyce smiled. "Just enough. That household is about to change." Within 45 minutes, her savings were moved into a trust-backed firewall, irrevocable, inaccessible without her biometric authorization. The joint fund, previously accessible by Samantha, was now frozen pending estate restructuring. The banker handed her the updated papers. "Ms. Ellis, you do know this might create some tension." Joyce gave a small laugh. "Son, I'm not trying to create tension. I'm restoring memory." That night, she remembered the rainy afternoon years ago, Samantha sitting at the kitchen table, tear-streaked, holding a calculator and muttering about emergency security. "I just want something to fall back on if things go sideways," Samantha had pleaded. "Please, Mom, just a fallback account. You won't even notice." Joyce had agreed. Of course she had. She'd always agreed when it came to Samantha. Until now. The next day, Joyce volunteered to run errands, an offer Samantha happily accepted. "Could you grab a few things from the store? Eggs, almond milk, laundry pods." Samantha dropped her card across the counter. "Use this. I don't feel like checking balances." Joyce nodded. "Sure, honey." Inside the grocery store, she took her time, touched the texture of ripe peaches, watched children dance beside the cereal aisle, let the fluorescent lights hum above her like old lullabies. Then, at checkout, she swiped Samantha's card. Declined, tried again. Declined. "Would you like to try another card, ma'am?" the cashier asked, glancing at the growing line. Joyce handed over her own, paid without a word, and walked slowly out into the late afternoon sun. She sat in the car for a moment before turning the ignition, letting the weight of the silence settle around her. Across town, Samantha's phone buzzed with a low balance alert she wouldn't understand. Not yet, but soon. Very soon. Samantha's card declines at the grocery store. Joyce watches quietly. They gave me a candle. I handed them a receipt. The candle flickered on top of a store-bought cupcake, one of those shrink-wrapped grocery aisle singles with a plastic dome and a too-sweet swirl of pink icing. Samantha placed it in front of Joyce with a grin so wide it almost looked like guilt trying to wear celebration. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said. "We figured you don't eat cake anyway, so portion control." Joyce smiled at the flickering flame, but didn't blow it out. The room felt sterile. Jake was still in his office, and Samantha leaned casually on the kitchen island like she was between Pilates and a podcast. Joyce looked at the cupcake. No card, no flowers, just a cheap ceramic mug beside it printed with "Best Roommate Ever." And under the mug, a receipt. 8362, groceries from the trip Joyce had run last week with Samantha's declined card. "I thought we could split it," Samantha chirped. "You know, since you eat here and all." Joyce picked up the receipt slowly. Her eyes scanned it, then met her daughter's. "Of course," she said softly. "Thank you for remembering my birthday." Samantha beamed, completely missing the edge buried in the politeness. 2 hours later, Joyce hosted her own birthday tea on the back patio. It was modest, just fresh lemon bars, Earl Grey, and her favorite tablecloth with embroidered lavender she hadn't brought out since her husband passed, and one guest. "Rita, this is my daughter, Samantha," Joyce said as her friend walked in, heels clicking softly against the tile. Rita was sharp, mid-60s, dressed in tailored slacks and a linen blazer, hair swept into a no-nonsense bun. Her handshake was firm, her smile pleasant. Samantha, caught off guard, blinked. "Oh, nice to meet you." "You too," Rita replied smoothly. "Joyce speaks highly of your investment here." Joyce poured the tea. "Rita and I used to work in real estate. She's still in the game, mostly estates and transitions." Rita sipped and glanced around the patio. "Lovely home. Square footage must be what, 3,400? That backyard alone could be its own parcel." Samantha stiffened. Why, why are we discussing square footage?" she asked lightly. Joyce tilted her head, serene. "Just catching up. You know, girls like us, always thinking about the next move." Rita chuckled. "We were just chatting about how downsizing isn't always about space. Sometimes it's about freedom, flexibility." Samantha forced a smile. Totally. So important to keep things clean and simple." Joyce offered her daughter a lemon bar. "Exactly what you told me last week about my closet, remember?" Samantha looked between them, her grin faltering. "Are you thinking of moving?" Joyce dabbed the corner of her mouth with a cloth napkin. "Just thinking, sweetheart. Exploring options. You never know what doors are still open, especially when your name's on them." Rita laughed gently, taking one final sip. "Well, Joyce, whenever you want to seriously explore, just say the word." Samantha's eyes narrowed, but her mouth stayed frozen in that hosting smile. Joyce stood to walk Rita out, giving her a brief hug at the door. They spoke in low tones, smiles, nods, hands lightly on shoulders, and then, like nothing had happened, Rita slipped out, except a folder remained tucked beneath her chair, glossy cover stamped in gold. "Property evaluation and market opportunities, confidential draft." Joyce looked at it, then at Samantha. "Oh dear," she said softly. "Looks like Rita forgot something." Samantha stared at the folder like it was ticking. Joyce picked it up, brushed it off, and said nothing else. That night, while Samantha banged cupboards in the kitchen loud enough to make a point, but not enough to pick a fight, Joyce placed the folder neatly in her desk drawer, right beside the deed. The tea had been sweet, but the real message even sweeter. Joyce's friend leaves behind a property appraisal folder. The room they gave me had 4 walls. I was building a 5th. The closet door creaked softly as Joyce opened it. 3rd time that week. She moved with the slow, deliberate rhythm of someone rearranging clutter, but her hands weren't searching for sweaters. They were selecting history, a velvet jewelry pouch from her 30th anniversary, a cedar box of documents wrapped in twine, the gold locket with her mother's picture tucked behind a miniature pressed violet. Each item slipped into a padded tote bag already half full. This wasn't packing. This was extracting, like a woman quietly leaving a country before war breaks out. Downstairs, Samantha's laugh echoed through the hall. Light, false, too loud. Joyce zipped the tote shut and slid it under the bed, next to the other two she'd already hidden behind a line of untouched shoeboxes. One more bag, and she'd make the first storage drop tomorrow. The rental unit was prepaid, 6 months in advance, climate-controlled, under her maiden name. No red flags, no digital paper trail, only analog freedom. Later that morning, she wandered into the kitchen, accidentally leaving her reading glasses in the fridge and referring to Jake as James. Samantha blinked. "Are you feeling okay, Mom?" Joyce blinked back. "Oh, I'm fine, sugar. Just a little foggy this week." Samantha didn't hide the raised brow. Joyce let the silence do the rest. By evening, she'd replaced her perfume with a soft lavender mist, more discreet for closed spaces, and started labeling boxes with codes only she understood. B1 meant wedding heirlooms. E2 meant essential documents. Samantha saw them stacked and asked, "Spring cleaning?" "Winter nesting," Joyce said sweetly. "Old habit." "Right, just let me know if you're tossing anything. I'll send it to donation." Joyce smiled, but said nothing. She already knew Samantha wouldn't ask twice. 2 nights later, Joyce walked into her room and stopped short. Her handbag was open on the dresser. She hadn't left it there, and the zipper, it was slightly askew, pulled just enough to say it had been searched, but not enough to assume carelessness. Joyce said nothing. She walked over, zipped it, placed it gently back in the armoire drawer. Then she pulled out a blank manila envelope. In Sharpie, she wrote, "Life insurance, active documents, do not open." Inside, she placed a single sheet of paper, a grocery list from 2009. She sealed it, then placed it at the top of her drawer, slightly angled like a snare. The next afternoon, Samantha announced she was going shopping with a friend. "Want me to pick up anything?" "Just some dignity if it's on sale," Joyce muttered. Samantha blinked. "What?" "I said Darjeeling if you pass the tea aisle." "Oh, sure." The front door clicked shut. 10 minutes later, Joyce returned to her room. The envelope was no longer angled. It had been opened, then tucked back into place. Joyce smiled, but it wasn't the kind Samantha was used to. This one wasn't sweet. It was surgical. That night, Joyce wrote in her notebook, "Evidence of control, unauthorized search, pattern of escalation. Her next mistake will be her last." She tucked it under her pillow. The room had 4 walls. Joyce was building the 5th, the kind they wouldn't see until it locked behind them. Days later, she walked into the bank with precision. "I'm here to fix a misunderstanding," she told the teller. In Mr. Chang's office, she handed over a folder marked Reallocation Directive. Dividends from her husband's legacy fund would now go into a private trust under her name only. She also froze the joint emergency fund, revoking Samantha Ellis's access. They thought she was broke, but Joyce had them on mute and auto deposit. Back home, Samantha didn't notice anything right away. She was on the patio, FaceTiming a friend about a new skincare serum, sipping a green smoothie that cost more than Joyce's first job's daily wage. Joyce passed by silently. She had no interest in confrontation. Not yet. She was saving that. But the next morning, it came. Samantha stormed into the kitchen holding her phone, face flushed beneath bronzer. "Did you change something with the bank account?" Joyce didn't look up from her tea. "You'll need to be more specific." "I got an alert saying the emergency fund is inaccessible. What's going on?" Joyce stirred her honey in slow circular movements. "I restructured a few things." "You what?" Samantha's voice climbed. "That's our shared security cushion." Joyce met her eyes. "You mean the one I created? The one I fully funded while you were launching vision boards?" Samantha blinked. "We had an agreement." "No," Joyce said, setting the spoon down. "We had an assumption. Yours." Samantha's voice dropped, sharp and trembling. "Are you trying to screw me over?" Joyce sipped her tea. "I don't recall owing anyone answers." That night, Joyce retrieved a box from the back of her storage closet, wrapped in deep plum paper tied with twine. On the lid, a handwritten card, "For all the things I never owed but still paid." She left it on Samantha's dresser. Inside were 33 neatly labeled envelopes. Each one held a copy of something Samantha had long forgotten: college application fees, paid; bridal shower catering, paid; startup tax filing, paid; hospital bills; childbirth, paid; first apartment deposit, paid. Every receipt, every invoice, every line item, proof. Samantha opened them one by one the next morning, her hands trembling, eyes scanning the unspoken math. By the time she reached the envelope marked Therapy Copays, Year 1, she stopped cold. There was no note, no accusation, just silence louder than any scream. And as she sat on the edge of the bed, surrounded by proof she hadn't earned what she thought she owned, Joyce sat calmly in the kitchen, the hum of the kettle rising behind her like a coming storm. Joyce sends Samantha a gift box containing copies of every paid bill since age 18. They spoke in whispers, but walls remember everything. It started as a hunch, a twitch in the air, a wrong kind of silence that followed every door click and whispered phone call. Joyce didn't need to guess. She'd lived through wars of words and winters of silence. She knew when someone was talking about her and not to her, so she stopped listening with her ears and started listening with her walls. The vent in the hallway outside Samantha's bedroom was old, metal, ribbed, and mostly forgotten. Joyce stood in front of it one night, a cup of tea in hand, pretending to stretch her back. Voices floated faintly through it. "I mean, she's not going to last much longer here," Samantha whispered to someone on speaker. A muffled laugh. Jake's voice? No, too high-pitched. A friend, maybe. "I told Jake if she doesn't make a move by spring, we make one for her. Assisted living isn't a punishment, it's a solution." Joyce's stomach went cold. Her tea tasted like metal. The next day, she visited a tech supply store and asked about vent-compatible sound amplifiers. The young clerk offered a knowing nod and handed her a discreet device the size of a thumb drive. Joyce smiled politely and left, paying with cash. No paper trail. That evening, she installed it in under 5 minutes. It sat tucked inside the vent, camouflaged by dust and shadow. The walls had been listening. Now they'd start recording. Over the next 3 nights, the vent gave up its secrets. Samantha to a friend. "She thinks she's clever, but half the time she forgets what day it is. We could stage it, like leave something out, say she wandered off again. Once she's out, we can finally update the house. Maybe flip it." Joyce sat in her room with headphones on, documenting every second. At first, her hands trembled. Then they stilled. By Friday morning, she had 5 files totaling just over 26 minutes of evidence. That afternoon, she met with Trevor Lane, a former detective turned private investigator. They sat in the back booth of a quiet cafe, her tablet between them. Joyce hit play. Trevor listened, his face neutral, jaw tight. When the last clip ended, he tapped the screen once, then looked at her. "You've got more than gossip. This is coercion strategy. If they're planning to push you out under false pretenses, it's financial manipulation, possibly elder fraud." Joyce nodded. "Good, then I want to move forward, legal and tactical," she said. "I want everything documented. I want you to look into her recent activity, financial, digital, anything with my name attached. I also want to know if she's been speaking to brokers." Trevor raised an eyebrow. "You're going full throttle." Joyce took a slow sip of tea. "No, dear. They did. I'm just catching up." That evening, she emailed everything to Mara, her attorney, with a single subject line. Phase 2, initiate. The following Wednesday, the doorbell rang at 3:17 p.m., sharp. Joyce was in the living room folding laundry when Samantha opened the door, wineglass in hand. A man in a navy suit stood there, briefcase in one hand, envelope in the other. "Ms. Green Ellis?" "That's me," she said brightly, still distracted. He handed her the envelope, expression unreadable. "Legal notice. Home equity line has been frozen pending ownership dispute investigation. All draw privileges suspended until further notice." Samantha blinked. I I don't understand. What does that mean?" The man tipped his head. "It means you can't borrow against this house anymore, not until ownership is clarified." He turned and left. Samantha slammed the door, heartbeat thudding audibly through the walls. Joyce placed another folded towel on the stack, then gently opened the vent cover again, this time not to install something, to listen, because walls never forget. And now, neither would she. A legal notice is delivered. Frozen home equity line. They open the doors to strangers. I open the books. Samantha tries to list the house without Joyce's permission, but the title blocks it. Joyce knew something was off the moment she smelled lemon pledge. It wasn't the usual kind Samantha used. Hers was artificial and cloying. This scent was sharper, high-end, realtor grade, the kind they used to stage homes into fantasies. Joyce peered out from the upstairs window and spotted it. A sandwich board sign staked into the front lawn. In bold black letters, Open House, Saturday 11 to 3, listed by Dillard and Company Realty. Her hands tightened on the windowsill. No one had told her, no mention, no warning, just an assumption that she didn't matter anymore. Downstairs, Samantha staged the house, guests arriving to soft jazz and candlelight. Joyce said nothing. She changed into her cream blouse, navy blazer, and pearls, the outfit she wore for real decisions. At 11:27 a.m., she descended the stairs as visitors began filing in. A man with a clipboard asked, "You the agent?" Joyce smiled. "No, just the co-owner." Samantha's head whipped around. "Mom!" Joyce faced the room. "Apologies. This home isn't legally for sale. I'm Joyce Ellis. 49% on the deed. No transfer approved." The air sucked out of the room like someone had cracked a window in a blizzard. The couple near the fireplace took a half step back. Samantha's cheeks flushed crimson. "Mom, what are you doing?" Joyce turned to the realtor, young, tanned, and suddenly pale. "Did you confirm full title clearance before listing this?" He stammered, flipping through his files. "We—" Samantha signed the papers. Joyce pulled out her phone and tapped once. The screen glowed with a scanned deed, her name bold and intact. "I never relinquished ownership. Your listing is invalid. I'll be issuing a cease and desist this afternoon." The murmur turned into motion. Guests quietly exited, murmuring things like, "Yikes!" and "This feels messy." Samantha stood frozen in the center of it all, holding her empty wine glass like it might protect her from the avalanche. After the last car pulled away, the realtor cornered her. "You told me the house was yours," he snapped. "It is," Samantha started. He shook his head, cutting her off. "No, not legally. You never had the right to sell this." He yanked the for sale sign out of the lawn, leaving behind a crooked patch of dirt. Joyce stood by the porch column, silent, until she wasn't. She turned to Samantha, eyes soft but merciless. "Don't open doors that don't belong to you." Then she walked back inside, her heels clicking like a judge's gavel on polished tile. Real estate agent tells Samantha, "You never had the right to sell this." They packed a bag for me. I unpacked my power. The suitcase was pink. Not Joyce's pink, no. This was bubblegum bright, a color that screamed performative kindness. It sat at the foot of her bed like a passive-aggressive invitation to vanish. Samantha stood in the doorway with folded arms and a too-sweet smile. "We thought it might be nice for you to take some time, just a few days. There's a really lovely place just outside the city, Sunridge Pines." "Sounds peaceful," Joyce said evenly. "It's not permanent," Samantha rushed, as if that mattered. "Just until things calm down, after all this house confusion." Joyce nodded slowly. "Of course, sometimes distance gives us clarity." Samantha sighed with relief. "I'm so glad you're being reasonable." Joyce smiled, carefully hiding the venom behind her lipstick. That evening, Joyce rolled the pink suitcase out the door, gave Samantha a light kiss on the cheek, and climbed into the cab she had called herself. Destination: not a retirement home, a luxury spa in Sonoma Valley. She arrived with the sunset, greeted by eucalyptus scents and the promise of silence. The room was wrapped in ivory linens and warm wood. A handwritten note on the pillow read, "Rest is not a luxury, it's a strategy." Joyce smiled. "Exactly." Meanwhile, back at the house, Samantha waited for the call from Sunridge. It never came. Instead, 2 days later, she received a blocked alert from their household bank account. Access denied, account owner privileges restricted. She tried again, same result. Samantha stormed into the kitchen, phone in hand, frantic fingers texting Jake. Samantha, can you try your login? Jake, all locked out, even mine. Did she move the money? She marched into the office, yanked open Joyce's filing cabinet. Empty. Just a single envelope left behind. This account has been retired, so have your assumptions. J. At the spa, Joyce soaked in a mineral bath with lemon slices floating beside her shoulder. Her phone buzzed quietly. Mara's name on the screen. Everything's filed, Mara said. Eviction request submitted. Co-owner clause invoked under breach of shared residency. Perfect, Joyce replied, watching steam rise. They packed me a bag. It's only fair I return the favor. You sure you want to go this far? Mara asked. Joyce didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched. Then I've spent years being silent. I think they've had enough peace. By the time Joyce returned 3 days later, the pink suitcase was still in the hallway untouched. She rolled it in with ease, dropped it at the bottom of the stairs, and walked directly to the kitchen. Samantha was there, waiting. She looked tired, hollow. Where were you? She snapped. Joyce set her handbag down. You said Sunridge. I heard Sunrise Massage. Easy mistake. You lied. No, Joyce said calmly, pouring herself a glass of water. I redirected. Jake appeared in the doorway, watching them both. You moved everything, Samantha accused. All the accounts, the emergency fund, the trusts. Why? Joyce sipped. Because I've been paying the bills while being treated like baggage, and I don't owe explanations for course correction. Jake cleared his throat, eyes darting between them. I looked at the deed again, he muttered. And the trust. She's still got power of attorney on the asset. Samantha turned to him, panicked. What does that mean? Jake rubbed the back of his neck. It means maybe your mom's not as clueless as you think. Joyce walked past them both, heels echoing on the hardwood. Correction, she said over her shoulder. I was never clueless. I was just patient. And patience, as it turned out, had an expiration date. Samantha's husband says, maybe your mom's not as clueless as you think. From the spa, I sent her love and legal intent. The postcard arrived in the late morning, wedged between a coupon flyer and a letter from the electric company. Samantha barely noticed it at first. She was scrolling through Zillow listings, trying to find comparable properties that might explain why their home hadn't sold. Because in her mind, it was still hers to sell. She flipped the postcard over lazily, expecting some impersonal message from a resort. Then she saw the handwriting, elegant, familiar. Joyce's. The front of the card was a watercolor painting of a chaise lounge under lemon trees, sunlight pouring through pale curtains. The back, in ink so poised it felt surgical, read, Hope you enjoyed the ride. I'm reclaiming my seat. Joyce. Beneath it, in slightly smaller print, P.S. Certified letter is coming. I suggest you read that one sitting down. It hit Samantha like a cold slap. She ran to the front door and flung it open, scanning the porch. And there it was, a thin envelope on thick paper, stamped with the seal of Linton and Green LLP. Inside, legal notice of property sale initiation. Joyce's name was listed as primary co-owner and executor of estate-based decisions. She had listed the house for resale, legally and completely within her rights. Meanwhile, at a quiet office on the edge of town, Joyce sat across from a second attorney. Not Mara, but a specialist in tenancy and cohabitation dissolution. I want to formally terminate any verbal or assumed agreements regarding shared residence with Samantha Ellis. Joyce said, hands folded neatly. And you're claiming financial manipulation, coercion, and emotional duress. I'm not claiming it, Joyce replied. I'm proving it. You'll find the supporting documents in that flash drive time-stamped. The lawyer clicked the pen. Understood. This will also lay the groundwork for an official eviction if she refuses to vacate. Joyce gave a polite nod. I'm not asking for fireworks, just a lock that turns without hesitation. By the time Samantha tracked Joyce down, she was back at the spa cafe, sipping ginger tea and reading a book titled Boundaries That Bite. She looked up as Samantha approached, frantic, makeup smeared, voice cracking. Mom, please, we can talk. Don't do this. Joyce tilted her head, studying her like she was seeing her daughter clearly for the first time in years. Now you want to talk? Samantha sat down without asking, gripping the edge of the table. I was stressed, okay? I made mistakes, but this, selling the house, eviction, it's too much. Can't we just reset? Joyce set her tea down. You mean the way I reset the power bills? The way I reset your overdraft fees? The way I reset every financial mess you didn't want to deal with for 20 years? Samantha's eyes glistened. I'm your daughter. I'm aware, Joyce said, voice calm, and you're aware of what you did. So let me say this plainly. Your name doesn't guarantee you access, not to my accounts, not to my time, and certainly not to my legacy. Samantha leaned in, desperate. Then what do you want from me? Joyce stood slowly, gathered her purse, and placed her sunglasses back on. She leaned in close enough to whisper, Sweetheart, she said gently, I'm just getting started. Then she walked away, leaving Samantha sitting at a table that didn't belong to her, in a world she never thought could exist without Joyce holding it. Up, Joyce smiles and replies, Sweetheart, I'm just getting started. She thought they were hers. I kept the receipts. Joyce repossesses or sells every asset she funded, car, furniture, even the wedding ring. It began with a knock. Not loud, not urgent, just precise. 3 raps against the front door at exactly 9 a.m. Samantha, in an oversized t-shirt and puffy-eyed from a sleepless night, peeked through the blinds. A moving truck, 3 men in uniforms, one with a clipboard. She opened the door, confusion unraveling into dread. Ellis residence? One asked. Yes. We're here to pick up all assets listed under Joyce Ellis. Authorization attached. He handed her a document. At the top, reclamation notice, legally approved property retrieval. Attached to it, an inventory list that ran almost 2 pages long. Samantha scanned the items. Queen mattress set, paid in full, 2018. Dining table, vintage oak, 2019. Sectional sofa, gifted, receipt enclosed. Washer dryer combo, appliance transfer 2022. 2017 Honda CRV, title under Joyce Ellis, 14 karat gold. Wedding ring, appraisal attached, office desk, shelving units, espresso machine. Samantha's hand trembled. You can't just take our stuff, she shouted. One of the movers shrugged. Ma'am, we're just following the court's approval. You're welcome to contact your co-owner. She signed off. Upstairs, Joyce stood by her bedroom window, watching it all unfold as the first piece, the white leather accent chair from the sitting room, was carried to the truck. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She simply picked up a manila envelope and sealed it. Across the front, returns policy for your records. Samantha stood in the driveway, screaming into her phone, pacing barefoot on hot concrete. You can't do this. You can't just... A pause. No, I don't know where she is. She's not picking up. Jake, help me. But Jake wasn't there. He'd gone to stay with his brother the night before, after muttering something about needing space to breathe. Translation, escape the fallout. Samantha watched as her car, still under Joyce's name, was towed from the driveway. A legal rep nearby stated calmly, these assets were loaned, not gifted. Loans can be revoked. Inside, Joyce descended the stairs slowly, savoring the moment. Samantha sat slumped on the couch, surrounded by bare walls. You took everything, she hissed, even the ring. Joyce's voice was calm. I bought that ring. You never paid me back. You're ruining me. Joyce laid an envelope on the table. No, you ruined what I gave. I'm just collecting. Then she walked out, quiet, absolute. Hours later, a young local reporter knocked at Joyce's temporary condo. Miss Ellis, he asked, adjusting his mic, would you care to comment on what neighbors are calling the repossession of the year? Joyce blinked. Pardon? He held up his phone, showing a tweet that had already gone viral. Retired woman repossesses daughter's life, one receipt at a time. Photo. Joyce walking calmly past Samantha as movers worked behind her. Joyce smiled faintly. No comment, she said, then closed the door softly. Inside, her phone buzzed. Another media inquiry, another interview request. The story had begun moving without her. And Samantha, she was no longer holding the pen. The media picks up the story, retired woman repossesses daughter's life. The one they cast out became the foundation beneath them. The champagne flutes clinked softly, and sunlight spilled through the oversized windows of Joyce's new condo, sleek, minimal, but undeniably warm. She moved through the open-plan space like a gracious host, pausing to refill glasses, exchange hugs, and laugh without needing to dim herself. The scent of fresh eucalyptus drifted from the entry table, and classical piano played faintly in the background. It was her first gathering since the move, her first space that wasn't borrowed, shared, or tiptoed through, and every person in the room was invited. At the center island, her book club friends from the library stood clustered, paging through the latest thriller while sipping rosé. Rita, the estate agent who'd once left a folder behind accidentally, laughed with Mara, Joyce's longtime lawyer. And Kevin, the young bank manager who'd helped her reroute her accounts, handed her a small house plant wrapped in a bow. "For the new roots," he said. Joyce touched the soft leaves and smiled. "They're growing in good soil this time." Later, as the party mellowed into quiet conversation and soft jazz, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Unknown number. She excused herself and stepped onto the balcony. The sky was soft peach, the city skyline glowing against the dusk. "Hello," a gentle female voice responded, almost unsure. "Hi, is this Mrs. Joyce Ellis?" "Yes, speaking." "I'm calling from Willow Gate, our women's shelter. One of our counselors saw the article about you online. The repossession story, the receipts, everything. You've become something of a legend around here." Joyce chuckled softly, brushing hair away from her face. "A legend? That's a new one." "We were wondering, would you consider speaking at our next event? You're the kind of story our women need to hear. Someone who turned being cast aside into power." Joyce didn't answer at first. Behind her, laughter floated through the glass, but in her mind, echoes still lingered. Samantha's voice calling her extra baggage, the sting of invisibility at her own dinner table, the cold dismissals disguised as care. She'd never imagined herself as anyone's keynote, but maybe that was the point. "I'm not used to microphones," she said softly. "You don't need to be," the woman replied. "You've already been louder than most ever dare to be." Joyce's grip tightened on the balcony rail. Then she exhaled slowly, feeling the weight lift again. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." The next morning, over coffee and light rain tapping the windows, she did something else unexpected. She opened her first social media account. It was just a single profile photo, her in a navy sweater, eyes clear, smile small, but unshaken. The bio read, "Not extra essential. Reclaimed my seat and the table, too." She followed one person, the Willowgate Women's Shelter. By noon, her inbox had a message, subject line, "Podcast guest request, boundaries and betrayal." "Hi, Joyce. We host a podcast on reclaiming identity after familial manipulation. Your story is inspiring. Would you join us next month to talk about what being extra really means?" Joyce stared at the screen for a long moment, her hand gently curled around the rim of her mug. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world still shimmered, because this time it was hers. A podcast invites her to speak on boundaries and betrayal. They packed my bags once, but I unpacked the truth and the title. The microphone was small, sleek, and deceptively simple. But when the red light blinked on, Joyce felt its power. Across from her sat a woman in her 30s, wearing oversized headphones and a kind expression. A cup of tea steamed between them. The soundproof studio hummed with a soft stillness that made every breath feel intentional. "We're rolling," the host whispered, smiling. "Just speak like you would to a friend." Joyce leaned forward, her palms resting on her lap. For a beat, she said nothing. Then, "They packed my bags once. Said I was too much, too old, too in the way." But what they never realized, her voice didn't tremble. It sharpened. was that I was the reason the floor never caved in beneath them. The podcast episode aired 3 days later. By midnight, the title, The Baggage They Should Have Carried, was trending in 3 states. Thousands of downloads, comments pouring in. This woman is a warrior. I sent this to my mom, she cried. She didn't just unpack her life, she unpacked every woman's silence. At 2:14 a.m., Joyce's phone buzzed. One new message from Samantha. Just 4 words. You ruined everything. Congratulations. No hi, no remorse, no punctuation even. Just a digital dagger. Joyce stared at it for a moment, then tapped the mic icon. Her voice was low, calm, cutting in its clarity. I built everything you tried to bury, including you. She hit send and turned off her phone. The next morning, Joyce sat at her desk and opened the envelope marked Legacy. With a steady hand, she crossed out the old names and wrote, All assets to the Marion Foundation in honor of Marion Ruth Ellis, mother, seamstress, backbone. That afternoon, she unpacked a long-forgotten box, journals, letters, keepsakes, each one placed with care. The teak elephant on the sill, the peach cobbler recipe in the drawer. Each piece whispered, You stayed. You weren't broken. As golden light filled her apartment, the phone rang. Not Samantha, the women's shelter. They needed a mentor. Joyce smiled and said yes. Only if they're ready to reclaim their stories, Joyce said. They are because you did. As the sun dipped below the skyline, she sat down to write one last thing. Not a will, not a legal brief, not a list of everything she'd funded and lost. Just a sentence for herself, a truth long denied, now finally spoken. She opened her journal and wrote, I was never the baggage, I was the backbone, and I'm done being quiet. I was never the baggage, I was the backbone, and I'm done being quiet.